Awesome.
Monday to Thursday, here we are, and we're back again for today's question about work. Today is day 158 of This Is Not Advice. For those of you who are here for the first time, I am Roy, and I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And we have my favorite kind of guest today, which is that when we have a guest who is a founder who we've backed, and we've had Christine's co-founder, Lori, on before, their company Sounding Board that they created together, and Christine's the CEO. It democratizes access to coaching. So basically coaching for professional development, what used to be called executive coaching because only executives had it.
That's
what
right.
is now something that in part because of Sounding Board, anybody in a company can have. And so with the kind of rise of coaching and in the startup world, we have advisors and everybody's got mentors. Folks have questions about what the difference is between these different kinds of supporters. And so Christine, thank you for joining us. And it would just be great to hear your view of what is the difference between a coach and a mentor?
Yeah. And look, first I'll say that all are important. Like, I run Sounding Board and I run a company that's delivering coaching. I have coaches around me, mentors, advisors, therapy, consultants. It really does, I think, take a village nowadays for development, overall personal and professional. But when we think a lot about what's the difference between coaching and mentoring, one really simple thing is even just the title of the show that we're on. Coaching is not advice, whereas mentorship often comes from a place of, hey, I've done this job before. Let me tell you, what worked for me when I was the head of sales at X, right? So it's coming and it's more functional. It's usually more tactical, and it's usually advice given from my prior experiences. Whereas my coach may not have even worked the same job as me, may not have done my job or even in my function, but they have a very strong skill set in helping me reach a level of understanding about a problem, about a challenge. And usually that's done through questioning, lots of asking of questions.
So one of the models that people have in their head for what a coach is in a work context is like a sports coach, which is like that person played basketball when they were a kid and they know the correct form for how to shoot, and they're almost more your teacher in some ways. And so you're saying that the model of professional coaching is not like being a teacher. I mean, obviously you learn things and are taught by the person, but that it sounds almost more like the way that therapy works, where the person's asking you questions and not telling you what to do, but eliciting from you your own thought process. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels to therapy in the sense that whether it's an approach or methodology, there's similarities. So a good example is, so my co-founder, Lori, was my coach, right? And she helped me at my last startup when I got promoted into being an executive for the first time. She actually has never been an executive at a hyper growth startup herself. But what she did know was, and had done, was coached hundreds of executives at other startups. So she's still bringing her experience and what she's seen, pattern recognition across that. And then that is how she can kind of direct her questioning, help me focus on the things that might be blocking me from being successful. But she's not telling me like, hey, this is how you run a sales.
All right, so now let me ask a really tense question about that,
Okay.
Which is, as you know, I ask the tense questions, but maybe not that tense this time. But, oftentimes investors try to support founders in getting to the answer. Would you rather, and I'm not talking about us and our investor relationship, but is the right way, although you're welcome to talk about it, I'm just not trying to pressure you to talk about it. I'm fine if you want to. Is the way that you think founders should work with investors, let's just make it generally, to look to the investor as a mentor or as a coach or as something else? Like, what's the right way to think about that relationship?
It's a little bit different because there's different power dynamics that come into play, right? Like, you've given me money, so yeah, and so there's like a vested interest that's different. But what I found is the most successful, at least with investors, is that too often founders think that the investors are the expert, so they defer to them, right? And in that sense, really though, what you should be doing is knowing that you are the one person that's running your company. You know your company and your industry better than anybody else. And while your investor may have a perspective that can broaden your perspective, you need to come into that with a point of view. So I would say, you don't treat them like someone that you're asking what to do, right? You're
Right.
sharing what you think you should do, and then being open to hearing a perspective that might help you shift your
Yeah,
mind.
I mean, I think your point about the power dynamic is really apt, especially, I think that power dynamic is most pronounced when the company may need more money from
Yes.
investors or from its current investors. Because like once the check is written, I often feel like I don't have any power at all. Like you just go do you, unless I did something nuclear, like I don't have any power. And my own preferred mode on it, which again doesn't always, like I can't say that I'm like great about always adhering to this, is I think of myself as a team member who, like, you've hired me to do a job. I have certain areas of expertise. You might ask me my view on stuff. I might know and I might not know, but my job is to supply hypotheses, ideas, perspectives. And when it comes to the areas where we're deeper than a typical founder, for example, fundraising or initial press or something like that, well, then I'm more confident. But like, I'll give you an example of something where personally I just don't know anything at all, is product. Like I have my attitudes as a user, but like beyond my attitudes as a user, how much does any of us really know? So I think your point about it is a really good one. And it's a great model for how people should work together. And I also hear you that from the perspective of a working person, you're sort of suggesting having a cabinet of all these categories. Don't pick between them. Yeah, have mentors, have a coach. And one of the things I love about coaches is they're the one person in the cast of characters who their only interest is you. Because like, you're literally paying them.
That's right. That's
right. Advisors are different, investors are different. So I think that's great. Well, that's today's not advice. And reminder, the reason this is not advice, and just like coaching is not advice, the reason this is not advice is we don't know enough about you or what you're going through to do anything other than tell you what works for us and how we think about it. Because otherwise, all advice is just somebody else's autobiography. And to be continued. And Christine, I hope you will come back. I hope maybe we'll get you and Lori together at some point.
Oh, that would be super fun.